Coming up on BSD Now, we know init systems have been all the rage recently, from systemd to openrc, launchd, and even nosh. A lot of work is being done in this area. Today we're going to be interviewing Mark Heily to discuss his efforts on relaunchd and how that differs from the rest. BSD Now, episode 118, BSD is Go for Launch, recorded December 2nd, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week, the week after Thanksgiving. So first of all, in the States, of course, obviously not everyone here is in the USA. So if you were in the States, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I know I did. I actually had like 2 days straight where I didn't think about anything work-related, which is kind of cool. And then Saturday came and went, and next thing you know, I'm playing on the computer game with something else. But, you know, it happens, right? There's always new things to check out and play with. And then I saw neat stuff happening in the graphics branch of the Haswell updates and stuff. I guess they fixed a bug that was breaking some Haswell chips, and it's a lot more stable now, and like the GL's working properly. So if you've been waiting for PCBSD's December image, I'm in the middle of rolling it right now. Probably have it done shortly after the show, and then I'll send it up to the mirrors, and you can start downloading and playing with it. But that was part of what I had to re-roll yesterday when I got the notification in IRC that, we fixed this long-standing bug. So I did sneak that in. We'll see if that works.
Awesome. I'm going to have to stick that on a USB stick and try it on one of my the Haswell NUC that I have.
Yeah, I never got one of those. I should have, but I'm trying to think. I have a little mini ITX here that's a Haswell. Maybe I should throw it on there.
Well, because
see how it works.
The first one I bought of the NUC, I purposely bought the one that was Ivy Bridge so that I knew the graphics would work. But then, the Haswell one was on sale, and I needed something to run my TV, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to try that out here. But yeah, we'll have images with it soon. So if you have Haswell hardware, you may want to grab a copy of that here in the next couple days. Or by the time this airs, if you're watching it after Thursday or Friday, it may already be online. So go grab that and give it a whirl. But that wasn't actually even in the news, something to talk about. We just kind of fell into that there. So we actually will get to your headlines now. So first up this week, it looks like we have an interview with Renato Westphal over a Brazilian OpenBSD developer. So I know you wrote some of the notes on this one here, Alan. So what exactly is happening? What's he talking about?
So mostly he works on networking related stuff. But basically he was telling the story of how he first got into OpenBSD. In 2011, he was an undergrad student working at a university industry partnership program. And he was tasked with implementing MPLS, the kind of not really a routing protocol, but anyway. But he had to implement it for Linux. And part of that encompassed working on an implementation of LDP, which is the label distribution protocol, because MPLS is for labels, labeling packets. And so the first thing he did was look for an open source implementation, and he found OpenBSD's LDPD. And looking at it, he was like, wow, that code is beautiful. I really like that. So he used that as his basis. With the nice ISC license, it's easy to port to something else.
Sure.
And he did that. And in the process, found some bugs in it and made some improvements. And being a good open source person, he contributed those back to OpenBSD. And then, he was invited to keep doing that and help build things. And that's how he ended up being an OpenBSD developer.
He got punished with the commit there, right?
Okay. Well, I guess they called them accounts in OpenBSD, but yes, same thing.
Sure.
And then the interview goes on to ask him a bunch of questions, but some of the ones I liked is he was asked if he was motivated, replace closed source router implementations like Cisco's and so on with open source software like OpenBSD. And he says, well, I don't administer any networks, right? I work full-time as a programmer. I have some friends, however, that have successfully replaced closed vendor solutions with OpenBSD boxes, and that for sure motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing. My biggest motivation, however, is the challenge of resolving complex problems, writing, trivial, simple code that is both secure and efficient, which is, what you expect to hear. Then he goes on to discuss some of the interesting features of EIGRP, one of the routing protocols he's implemented, and then kind of how he went about developing EIGRPD. Just
All
a
these acronyms, man. We
puddle
need to
of
keep a
letters.
dictionary on the website. Like people
It's
can
the
quickly refer to and be like, what does that one stand for?
Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol daemon.
There you go. Okay.
Luckily, there are man pages for these things, and that helps a lot.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. So when in doubt, hit up a man page or Google it,
Yeah.
folks. Sorry.
One of the things when he was asked what was missing from the routing stuff in OpenBSD, he said, there's most everything is really there, but he says what he'd like to see is implementing new features and protocols while they're in their draft stages, in the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. He says, I'd like to see OpenBSD as a reference platform for the development of new routing and networking technologies in general. And, just the BSDs in general, I would like to see that. That's why it's great to see, TCP fast open and stuff being done on FreeBSD so that, there's a good implementation with a copy free license that's available when somebody wants to use those new technologies. And
Sure. Like a good reference to look at.
yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. That definitely is a neat interview there. Well, next up, though, this one, actually, I've been waiting for this for a while, but the article reminded me about it this week. But we got kind of a mini tutorial here on how to use Let's Encrypt on FreeBSD with an Nginx reverse proxy. But little backstory for those who don't know, Let's Encrypt is a new certificate authority, and that's just let'sencrypt.org, which is just getting ready here soon to allow you to create free and automated certificates. They've been in closed beta since, I guess, September-ish, and they're opening to a public beta sometime December 3rd, so tomorrow. So if you're watching this recorded, it's already open, so you can go ahead and try it. If you're watching it live, sorry, you got to wait another day. But the guide's actually really timely. Like the open beta hasn't even launched, and we already have a tutorial on how to use this and make it particularly useful for running a reverse proxy. But instructions are fairly straightforward if you want to take a look at it. He starts off by just installing the package on FreeBSD.
But
yes. Excuse me. I did not get the name on that one. My bad. But she starts off by installing the package, which is available via ports or package system on FreeBSD. I guess it's a Python applet there, which will allow you to generate the certificates, of course. So you'll need that. And then she has a good example of the Nginx config, setting up, for example, a catch-all vhost, which will then redirect you over to the proper HTTPS version of a site. Which is pretty slick. And then the certificate creation is a little different on Let's Encrypt. You don't have to fax them a copy of your driver's license or anything else. I've had to do with like Start SSL and others in the past. So that's why I'm kind of looking forward to doing this. I have a few things where it's like, I really should switch that over to HTTPS now that I can get a free cert.
But, it's not worth the pain or the $20 or whatever. But, yeah.
Sometimes there's just a lot of hoops to jump through and pain, but now it's like there's a tool, package add, run a couple commands, cert ready to go. And I don't have to deal with crummy self-signed certs anymore and nasty nag boxes, and like, we don't trust this. So this is
most of the other ones are all dependent on email. It's like, how about you use one of these other ways to prove that I own the domain name?
That's right. So I think they have a couple different things that can check the whois records and email, or you can upload a file to the domain. There's a few different things you can do. But anyway, I guess we'll find out more when the public beta goes live tomorrow. But pretty cool, though. She also wrote a nice renewal script. So that's kind of a bonus. Even if you already know how to do all this, like, you still may want to go click the link and look at the tutorial, because she wrote this nice script you can throw into cron, which will basically look at your certifications daily and then automatically renew them when they're about 14 days from expiring. Or it'll throw an error for somebody to come take a look at me and figure out what happened and fix it, which that's really slick.
The number of times the Nagios monitor telling me that I have 2 weeks to renew a certificate has saved me from embarrassing situations is quite high. And with Let's Encrypt, just being able to say, as soon as it gets low, renew it automatically. And then you just have your threshold on your Nagios alert slightly less than that. And so if it doesn't work, then you get the alert. But if it does, you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah, this is going to make it so much more simple now. I mean, it downloads, installs the new certs, and then it restarts Nginx for good measure, because why not?
Well, you have to pick up the new cert.
Yeah, to pick up the new cert. But I'm just saying the script you put together is really complete. So if you need something quick, you can just throw on cron on your box. Then you may want to take a look at this article and get ready to use this. So anyway, good job to the author and, of course, to the Let's Encrypt folks, because I think this will be handy. Okay, so next up, you've heard us. We've been talking a little bit about OpenBSD's new hypervisor, or the VMM tool that's been under development that Mike Larkin's been working on. Well, it took another step closer to reality today because he's pushed the initial bits of it into the base kernel and world. So we do have something to play with now.
Ooh.
And he does mention in the commit messages that this still needs quite a bit of work, and as such, it's not enabled by default. So you'll still have to go flip a bit to turn it on and play with it. However, for some of the adventurous among you on OpenBSD, you can now turn it on and play with it. Couple notes, though, that he mentions in the commit log here. Right now, there's no BIOS, and so as such, it can only be used to boot other OpenBSD instances, kind of like Beehive was at the early incarnations there. But he does mention that other BSDs could be supported fairly quickly, and he mentions he did a 1-hour port to bootstrap a NetBSD, for example. So it seems like maybe that's enough low-hanging fruit there. Maybe people want to start contributing ways to boot other BSDs in it. But he also mentions there's not a lot of documentation expected for this release because there's still a lot of ongoing churn under the hood. So he said, take a look at the man page for the details. There should be enough there to at least get you bootstrapped and get started with it. But you'll probably see some more docs once things start to stabilize a little farther down the road.
Yep.
And of course, we'll bring that to you when that happens.
But yeah, it's interesting that some of the features that were the core of VMM, like shadow paging and i386 support, are some of the ones that are currently apparently have rotted in his tree and needs some love. So.
Right. Well, getting it pushed in the tree, I think, will help get more eyes on it.
Well, these are the parts that he didn't push yet.
Oh, he hasn't pushed those
He had to
yet.
temporarily remove some code that had rotted in his local tree. So support for AMD, the i386, shadow paging, and a couple other things aren't in yet. But I imagine we will see those, and it'll be interesting because shadow paging was the big thing that Beehive doesn't have, right? You have to have a new enough processor where it has extended page tables built in, whereas this feature would allow you to run VMM on older hardware. I'm not entirely sure if you would actually want to, but it'll be available.
But yeah, it gives you the option at least, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I can see, OpenBSD on a lot of older routers, for example, not routers, but, older PCs that are being used as routers. This may come in handy for being able to play with stuff. But yeah, we will, of course, keep you up to date when more of the information gets pushed into the tree and as new features start to land. Okay, well, next up, we have a story about how Yahoo switched to FreeBSD. If you are new to the BSD world or just young, I mean, some of the stuff I had to learn at one point too, right? I mean,
if you're too young, you might not really know that Yahoo was a thing. That it was a really, really big thing at one time.
That's right. It was a big search engine, way back in the days. Think Google, guys. Like that's small.
Except for Google didn't exist yet at this point.
That's right. But tell us about the story we have here, Alan, about how they got started with FreeBSD. What brought them there?
Yeah, so this is basically kind of the origin story of Yahoo, written by the co-founder of Yahoo for the FreeBSD News. Of course, that website's not there anymore, so we have somebody's cache of it. But Yahoo began life at Stanford University as a project there, and it was running on a DEC Alpha running and a Spark machine running SunOS. And that worked okay, but they basically couldn't handle the large volume of HTTP requests that, the C10K problem of, 10,000 people trying to go to your website didn't exist up until this point. And so, after leaving Stanford, they tried a few different things like IRIX, Linux, BSDI, and a couple other things, but they're not impressed with any of them in terms of performance and stability, and they were still looking. And as Yahoo grew more and more popular, the scalability and stability were becoming very critical. And so at the time, nobody that was working at Yahoo knew anything about FreeBSD. But after seeing references to it, they thought they'd give it a try. And at this point, they've tried a bunch of things, and they found that, trying each different thing took, 3 days trying to get it installed and running and so on. But this is to their surprise, they downloaded FreeBSD from the website, got the floppy boot image because, this is how long ago this was.
Well, you better explain what that is, Alan. There's people who haven't seen one of those.
So a floppy disk
my kids have no idea.
Yeah, so a floppy disk is kind of like a USB stick, but it only holds 1.4 megabytes.
Rocking 1.4 megabytes.
Yeah.
And your installer very often would be like insert disk 6 out of 10 or something. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, wait. I interrupted the flow of the story. Darn.
Yeah. So they tried FreeBSD and they managed to get it working very quickly because sysinstall, again, it's like most people's biggest hate with FreeBSD was sysinstall, but I've heard so many stories of people being like, sysinstall was the reason I got into FreeBSD.
Sure.
Sysinstall bit me because when you were finished, it took you back to the original menu. And if you press enter one too many times to get finishing up the old one, you would start the install over again and just obliterate the install you just finished.
Yeah, that could be annoying.
Yeah. Anyway, so they got FreeBSD installed and started running it, and they were really surprised when they, had a fully configured system that actually worked, and that when they switched their, a couple days later, we added a FreeBSD box to our cluster of web servers. Not only did it outperform the rest of our machines, but it was much more stable. A few weeks into the experiment, we were sold. Although the price was certainly attractive, it was actually the stability and performance and obviously access to the source code, because that was kind of a thing at that point. If they were considering iRix and some of the other ones, they might not have access to the source code. And they said ever since then, they've used FreeBSD exclusively for production and development environments at Yahoo. Over the years, Yahoo eventually tried to switch away from FreeBSD, although they've never actually completed that project. And to this day, the front page of yahoo.com is still served by FreeBSD machines because it works. And when every time they try to move it to Linux, it stops working.
Right, it just causes more pain to try and change it.
I love how they were talking about having 50 Pentium 100 boxes running FreeBSD 2.1 and 2.2.
Quite a cluster.
And eventually getting to, the machines we use range from Pentium 100 megahertz with 64 megabytes of memory to Pentium Pro 200 megahertz with 256 megabytes of memory.
All right, rocking now.
Yeah. And in addition, I/O performance is needed. We used CCD to concatenate disks together, and then 100 megabit per second fast Ethernet controllers for the network, because that was a lot of internet back then.
That was fast back then. We'll never saturate this.
It said FreeBSD was extremely stable for us. We've seen over 180 days uptime on a machine serving 4 million HTTP requests per day. And performance is impressive too. With disk striping using CCD, we've been able to serve 12 million HTTP requests per day on a Pentium Pro 200 with only 128 megabytes of memory. They said one of the only negatives we found with FreeBSD has been the lack of third-party software. I guess that was kind of a thing in FreeBSD 2, though by FreeBSD 4, pretty much everything you wanted was available.
Sure.
And they said, fortunately, this is changing, but there's still a long way to go. And then they said one of our biggest technical challenges is scaling our services at the pace of rapid growth. Looking forward, we are really interested in SMP to achieve even better price performance. Back then, when you could put 2 processors in a machine, you didn't have. That's the only way. They didn't have cores yet, right? You just had 2 processors with 1 core each, and that's what you got.
That was a big deal.
And
right?
a lot of stuff could only run on the first processor, so only some of the stuff could be offloaded to the second processor. And they were also interested in using alpha hardware instead of x86 hardware. And then looking at FreeBSD to provide other services such as large, reliable RAID file servers. It's really interesting to see, what was happening in FreeBSD back then. And, if you had told the people back then that, FreeBSD will be like the biggest thing in storage in the year 2015, they'd be like,
oh, no.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right? Just took a whole new file system, right? But, yeah. Well, you didn't say. I guess there's a note here about they had a few important Perl scripts, which they said tended to crash on their Linux boxes, but when they deployed them on FreeBSD, they just kept on running. So,
and that's
+1 for Perl.
Basically how FreeBSD won their competition against Linux when they were setting this up was performing slightly better, but more importantly, the Perl script that was Yahoo didn't crash on FreeBSD, and it did on Linux.
Nice. Well, we have a link as well in the show notes if you want to read the Hackers News thread where people are discussing this as well and sharing old stories.
Yeah, quite a few good old stories in there, kind of unrelated to this. And also a couple of Yahoo's, people that worked at Yahoo over the years chime in with, this is what it looked like by 2005 and 2008 and so on. But some of them are speculating about them definitely being off FreeBSD by now, but I know for a fact that they, in fact, are not. They have this version of FreeBSD called like Yahoo BSD 7.9 or something like that. I forget what the version is. And it's kind of bits of 4 and then bits of 7 and bits of 11 kind of.
Oh, well,
Yeah. Well,
interesting combination.
they have terrible things, but I've also heard stories of them having some FreeBSD 4 binaries and they don't have the source code for it anymore. It got lost somehow, and they just got to keep that binary working.
That tape backup got lost, right?
Yeah, the original version of that file only existed on somebody's laptop, and then it died. Or I think one of them was Peter was developing it and sending snapshots to somebody to try, and eventually they found, all right, the snapshot 4 snapshots ago works, but all the newer ones don't. And Peter's like, well, I don't have the code for the one 4 snapshots ago anymore. All I have is the newest one.
Right. Well, that's great.
Yep.
Well, again, take a look at that link. You'll find all kinds of cool old nuggets like that in the thread there. Okay, well, we're going to head to our interview here in just a moment. But, of course, before we do, we have to mention the first sponsor this week, which we're going to be starting with IX Systems. So ixsystems.com/BSD Now is, of course, the link you want to go ahead and hit up when you get a chance. But it looks like we got a new article they've shared this week about what's new and covering some of their LISA conference.
Yeah, they got a couple of things, actually. They have a recap from LISA, the Large Systems Administrator Conference. They were there and met with a bunch of interesting people and talked about things. But actually, they have even more new stuff since then. They were also, Drew was also at FaucetCon, which is in Florida, if I remember correctly. So they got the story and pictures from that as well. But they also have the Mission Complete winner for November was selected. Stephen from Spin the Yarn Productions, which is a graphical and documentary filmmaking studio. And they talk about, as a graphic animator for making movies, he did his work on a Mac and then saved it to an external hard drive, and quickly learned that didn't work very well.
Yeah, that's bad.
And specifically, when he started working with the documentary filmmaker and having a second person, they were like, well, we can try to tell the Mac to share the external drive, and we both try to write to it, and it's like, well, what you really want is something where, that one hard drive in that external enclosure isn't the only copy of your important material for your whole movie that you've spent years working on. And so they built a FreeNAS server, i5 processor, 16 gigs of RAM, and a bunch of 4 terabyte drives. And now they have, all the assets for their movie are not going to suddenly be corrupted or lost if that external hard drive decides it's having a bad day.
Sure.
And
that's cool. The IX Systems, of course, the ones who are making that happen right now.
But
yeah,
you got a prize for getting the story of this month, and so make sure you send in your story for for December. Go to ixsystems.com/mission complete and tell a story about how you used FreeBSD or FreeNAS or ZFS or open source or IX Systems hardware to solve a problem or to complete your mission, and you could be the winner next month.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to seeing that and bringing you next month's winner. So see if it can be you. Again, ixsystems.com/BSD Now as well. So go there, and when you talk to the guys, let them know you heard about it here.
Yes. The other interesting one is IX Systems TrueNAS product was just selected for the NASA Stratospheric Observatory for the Infrared Astronomy Project. So the USRA, which is the University Space Research Association, which is an association of a bunch of universities interested in space research, and NASA are teaming up, and they're getting a TrueNAS a 1 petabyte TrueNAS to store all the graphics and so on. And they said the TrueNAS gives the USRA a scalable storage system that can grow up to the 4 terabytes that they need, while using only
4 petabytes.
4 petabytes that they might need, while using only 40% of the rack space and cooling costs, and 50% less, and costing 50% less to buy than all the competing solutions they looked at.
Dude, yeah, that's a good deal. Those are the kind of things we like to hear.
Yeah.
And, they can do that for your business, too. It's not like they only work with NASA. I mean, you call them up and tell them what you're looking for. It may not be 1 to 4 petabytes, but they will definitely make something that works for you no matter the size or scale.
Yeah, if I add all of my ZFS together, I have like 0.9 something petabytes, but I
Mhm.
don't have 1 petabyte in one pool. That would be pretty amazing.
Insane. That's pretty cool. Well, again, if you guys have stories like that, let us know
Mhm.
too. We love to hear about those. Well, we're joined now by Mark Heily, who's the founder and I guess developer of relaunchd. So first of all, thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Well, we're looking forward to this, and I know init systems have kind of been all the rage, so this is kind of cool to
Yeah.
get to talk about this with a developer of one. So first of all, since we've not had you on the show before, give us a little bit about your background. How did you first get involved with BSD or Unix in general?
Okay, sure. So I've been using Unix-like systems for about 20 years, both as like a hobbyist, as a professional capacity. So I've kind of floated around a lot. I've done a lot of Linux, tried all the different BSDs. I don't think there's one like true operating system to rule the world, but I enjoy playing with different technology. So I used OpenBSD a lot as a firewall back when I
Hmm.
ran a firewall on my old PC, like Pentium 2, Pentium 3 era.
Sure.
Um, but eventually I stopped doing that when it became cost prohibitive and old hardware dies and
Hmm.
the new stuff is so much easier. I also went through a phase with like antique hardware collection. So had a Spark Station 20, ran NetBSD on that. And it was pretty cool, but again, very loud, old fashioned, like slow. So didn't last. So that's kind of the trajectory that I go on. Like I'll find something new, try a new operating system. I would say primarily I spent most of my time on Linux, but recently got into FreeBSD pretty much through FreeNAS actually. So at my work, we were looking for a new storage system. So I saw that FreeNAS was pretty cool and hadn't used FreeBSD in a long time. Picked it back up. Saw the white text on the black background. I was like, oh man, this is like, good, brings back good memories. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
I should be dual booting this. And then I'd always been meaning to install PCBSD, so I think that was also how I got back into BSD.
Hmm.
PCBSD is probably the easiest BSD I've ever installed, and I would say I've tried to use FreeBSD on my desktop pretty much for the last 5 to 10 years, and just every time I would either fail or it wouldn't be good enough, I get sick of it and blow it away and install Linux. But PCBSD I think was so easy and everything worked out of the box that I just stuck with it.
Hmm. Okay.
And I've been using ZFS for a long time professionally, starting with Solaris. So I was really excited to convert like everything in my house over to ZFS and dual boot, and so that was working great until ZFS on Linux decided to crap out, and then I was like, well, I'm done with this. Like, the it's a long story about how it broke down, but suffice to say, I just decided to move forward and just go with PCBSD. So I'm
Oh,
using that
great.
as my primary desktop now for the last few months, and so I've just been looking. I enjoy tinkering, coming up with little small projects. So I was like, as soon as I heard some of the press around the next BSD effort, and I
Hmm.
was like, well, you know, launchd sounds pretty cool. I've seen what happened with System D. Like, I've seen that kind of mess. Like, why don't I
Hmm.
try making it an init system? Because this looks really easy and fun, and for the most part, it has been.
Cool.
Cool. So, what sort of other Unix projects have you worked on in the past? What's your resume look like?
Well, probably the most serious projects that have gone viral in the open source community have been porting some of the other stuff from the Darwin open source repositories. So I'm pretty much the main developer of the Grand Central Dispatch ports. So that's
Hmm.
libdispatch, pthread work queues, um, and libkq, which ports kq to pretty much every operating system out there. So those were all kind of like very ambitious things. It took me a long time to bring to fruition, but eventually we got libdispatch ported and GCD working pretty much everywhere. Android, Windows, Solaris, Linux, FreeBSD to an extent, although it's kind of weird because there's an older version of libdispatch still around there.
Hmm.
So that pretty much was successful, and didn't do much after that until picking up relaunchd now is probably the main thing I'm interested in.
Okay. Well, speaking of relaunchd, tell us a little bit about that. So obviously it relates to Apple's launchd. So where does that split off, or how similar is that?
Sure. So I'm trying to make it as similar as possible.
Hmm.
And so I was really interested in the next BSD launch and some of the information that was coming out about what Jordan Hubbard and those guys were doing to bring LaunchD to the open source world. But when I saw it, I was like a little concerned that it was really kind of difficult to implement something as complex as LaunchD is from the Apple side, because mainly because it relies on mock IPC, and
Hmm.
that's definitely not a very portable thing or a trivial thing to get into other operating systems. So I was like, well, I think it's good, but I don't really want to run NextBSD on my desktop. I think it could take a really long time for those technologies to mature. And there's kind of like this interdependency between notifyd and libasl and lots of other kind of peripheral technology that goes into LaunchD. So what I was interested in is like starting from scratch, what can we do to implement a portable version of LaunchD that we just build in, start small, build and add the features that we need, so that people can start using LaunchD right away, and that we can start playing around with it, and also develop something that would be useful for a lot of different operating systems, like all the BSDs, Linux, Minix, embedded OSs that haven't been invented yet. But basically, looking at what System D has done, I know that they're not going to create a portable init system. They say that they won't do it, and they're creating like basically a monster. not
Hmm.
to not to disparage it too much, but it's like a very complex and involved thing. So I think the init system should be very simple, easy to understand, and that really is what I find compelling about LaunchD, is that you have one XML, or we've switched to JSON to you have one file, pretty easy to read, pretty easy to understand. Like a human system administrator could figure out what to do with it. Developers could pick it up fairly easily, but it's just very powerful in the way that you can launch programs and describe exactly how you want them to run. So.
Nice.
Cool. So the original implementation of relaunchd was in Ruby, is that correct?
Yeah, so this was really kind of because I do a lot of Ruby programming in my day job, and so I felt like very confident I could just bang out a really quick Ruby script. I'm like, I know this thing just reads JSON and launches a command. Like, how hard could that be? So
Hmm.
I put together a very quick proof of concept, and it actually works. I was really surprised that you can do a lot of things in Ruby, in terms of calling different syscalls, chroot, all that kind of stuff. So it was a fun little toy to tinker with, but I started getting the feedback that people weren't interested in looking at it because the proof of concept was in Ruby.
Hmm.
So like I'd always intended to build an actual C application if it made sense and if people were interested in the direction
Hmm.
that it was going. So I got the sense that people were interested, but the Ruby was a real turnoff. So I'm like, all right, let's just go ahead and get started on the C implementation, and that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. But
Well,
when
I
I
was one of those
Ruby,
people.
it takes a long time. Yeah, I mean your feedback. Basically, everyone who gave me feedback was like, I like the idea, but I don't want to run Ruby as PID 1, and so like, but I think it was never the intent really to be a Ruby program. It was more like, can I do LaunchD and can I really start to understand it? So I think it was educational for me, not having used LaunchD ever before this, to write a LaunchD implementation to understand like what is it trying to do and how do the various pieces fit together, because it made it easier for me to write the C implementation
Hmm.
after.
Cool.
That makes sense.
And so there maybe are some artifacts left in the code. I noticed like when you want to make a directory, you're actually writing a ASPrintf to write out the shell command and then running it rather than just using the mkdir like syscall.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say that this initial version of the C code is built for speed, and like there's probably some embarrassing things in there, and I'm definitely willing to go back and remove some of those kinds of things, especially the ASPrintf. Like I wanted to emphasize speed, safety over speed, I should say. So I didn't use any fixed buffers. I wanted to use the ASPrintf to kind of ensure that there's no memory overflows, and so I think there's a lot of rough edges internal to the code. So definitely don't put this on your servers at work or, try to run anything serious on it because I'm sure that some bugs will be found.
Sure.
Well, yeah, like
But
the obvious one I see there is in the one where you're calling system on using bin rm instead of like calling unlink. Because you're ASPrintfing some strings that are provided by the user, if I put a semicolon in there, I could make you run some second command as init, right?
okay. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear, or I
Yep.
could probably find where you're talking about.
Yeah,
But
it's like line 74.
See, we're helping you debug it on the fly. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah, so I really would like. I'm not proud, so I think there's some good code in there.
Mhm.
There's some really quickly done code. But I think overall it's a pretty simple system. It's like less than 2 to 3 thousand lines of code. So it really is it's in the state where I think it's complete enough to start polishing and fixing these kinds of bugs and
Nice.
starting to figure out how we want to actually use it, if at all.
Okay. Well, speaking of state, so how far along would you say it is right now, as in like what works and what doesn't?
What I consider to be like the core functionality works, like starting jobs, reading property lists, unloading jobs. We have like socket activation, simple cron-based jobs, and I've been experimenting with some things like running things in a jail. So I would say that the things that most people want to use are there, but a couple of the big pieces that are missing are irregular cron jobs. So cron jobs that start like, I want to run this every Tuesday at 2:30 o'clock in the afternoon. Like that level of cron scheduling is not available. It's also not doing any kind of process supervision yet. So if the process dies, it won't automatically restart it based on all the parameters that you can dictate. And there's a few minor things like resource controls and things like that, none of these should be too difficult to implement, with the possible exception of the cron. So I've been looking at like the Vixie cron code and some other cron implementations, and anything dealing with date and time is going to drive you insane. So that is something that I'm not looking forward to implementing. And I may even take the original launchd code and drop that in as a cron replacement. So I'm not opposed to doing that.
Okay.
But I think it's pretty close. So
Well, I say I've been using it here to kick off some things. Just this morning I was playing with it, so it definitely does stuff. That's cool.
yeah, I mean, it starts a program. Like
Mhm.
it seems like a very simple thing to launch a program, but when you actually look at all the things that can go into it, it's a bit more complex.
Cool.
Right. So what features are currently on the roadmap before you get to a beta stage? Like what are the blockers for getting to that point?
I haven't really thought about beta as a thing. Like I feel like it's already in the stage where people could start playing with it. But what is interesting to me is like how would this work within the ecosystem of a real operating system like FreeBSD. So I'm starting to kind of think about how it's going to play well with the existing RC scripts. Because let's say somebody wants to start Apache up using launchd, like how do you go and like do service status on it, or some of the other things that people want to do, and also just thinking about how do we make it so that there's some plausible path to converting things to run under launchd and under the traditional init system. So I don't think anybody's going to just drop the classic init system overnight. So it's going to have to be something like IPv4, IPv6, where you run dual stack with your init systems for a period of time. And I think there's some progress that we could make to doing that, but it's outside of the bounds of the original launchd project. So it's sort of like new concepts that haven't really been fleshed out yet. Same with jails. Like I think jails are really the key to make this a compelling init system to use, because it makes working with jails a lot easier. When I first started playing with jails, I saw that you have to run a firewall with NAT and do like port forwarding to get packets from the main system into the jail, assuming you don't give the jail its own public IP address. But launchd lets you bind to all the sockets in the parent system and then execute whatever commands need to happen inside the jail. So it inherits those bound sockets and then you don't have to use a firewall or NAT or port forwarding or anything like that. It's like you listen, you launch something from the global zone, that's to use the Solaris term, and then it gets all the resources it needs to be able to launch stuff in its jail. And I've also been thinking about Capsicum too, like doing Capsicum sandboxing within the property lists of relaunchd would be really cool. So then a system administrator could look at this one JSON file and say, all right, here's all the Capsicum syscalls and directories that this program needs to access. Let launchd take care of setting up that sandbox, and then the program gets launched inside of something that's already been secured with Capsicum, and you don't really have to worry about or even look at the source code to that program. Like it's kind of separates the security policy from the implementation. So it's those kinds of things. It's like, how do we bring the value add to launchd to make it compelling and motivate people to work on it? Because without motivated developers and people who want to solve these kinds of problems, I think it'll be very slow progress in moving this.
Interesting. So yeah, those are neat ideas. I'm excited to hear about that, especially the not needing to run NAT or whatever to send stuff to jails like that.
Yeah, so
sounds really cool.
Kind of like inetd, except for you launch the resulting process in a specific jail.
In the jail.
Yeah. Although I think the problem with the Capsicum idea is that most programs do some things at the very start that Capsicum doesn't allow. Like, normally after you sandbox in Capsicum, you can't open any more files. And so if you Capsicumize, then launch the application, it can't open any files. So normally in Capsicum, you don't lock it down until after you finish the initialization part of the program, right?
Yes, the idea is that you would open up all the files ahead of time, like open up all the directories, and then inherit those. And so it would have to communicate and figure out what files and things that it had inherited from the parent environment. So, definitely lots to do to make that even a possibility.
Okay. Well, I know we've talked a lot about init systems over the last couple of years, especially the systemd stuff going on, and it seems like we're seeing things get hit a lot by feature creep. So is relaunchd going to be the same? Or, I mean, the couple ideas you gave us here sounded really good, but is it going to be controlling my Pulse audio next? Or like, what's going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I threw out these new features because honestly, features are what people are interested in. And just being able to launch a program doesn't excite anybody in this day and age. But I think the features that I'm interested in developing are really tied to launching programs and giving people more control over how programs run, what happens when they die, how to like auto scale up or auto scale down, and some other things that the traditional init systems weren't designed to handle. So I want to take what launchd has to offer, what the init standard BSD init systems have to offer, like combine those features and then add whatever new features make sense from like a security standpoint or a convenience standpoint to make it more flexible and easier to control your process. Like, I'm not interested in like doing any graphical work or taking over like the host names or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try not to allow it to become something like systemd.
Okay. So are there any other specific features you definitely don't want to do?
Not really. I mean, there's things that I'm personally not as thrilled about, like IPC. So systemd uses dbus for its IPC, and launchd uses mock IPC very heavily. I think IPC is interesting, but I don't want to make it like a core part of relaunchd because not everybody wants to run dbus or use mock IPC. It's just not something that the Unix world has embraced entirely yet. So I want to make that kind of like a plugin. And that is something I do want to develop. To avoid the feature creep, I want to provide a plugin framework that if you wanted to do like dbus stuff, like that could be a plug. You would install the dbus plugin, and then it could support any dbus related features of programs that need to launch based on dbus events.
Okay. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. So how can new users or developers go about testing and getting involved in the project?
Well, the main place to go is the GitHub page. So GitHub, M Heily, relaunchd. So I've set up an IRC channel. So if you're interested in, talking real time about testing or getting ideas, I'll hang out there periodically. And just email is always a way to get back to me with some information. There's no mailing list as of yet, but this is such a young project that really I'm the only developer on it. So I'm sure after like a few other people get involved, then we'll probably set up a mailing list
Okay.
and get a little more sophisticated. But right now, it's just download the source code from GitHub, do a make and make install, and
Well, I was going to tell people we have actually an earlier version in our package tree already, and I see you have an updated port, which we just discussed via email. So I was going to tell you, I just got finished with the Poudre run of that, and it passes Portland, so it looks gold. I might even just go ahead and commit that to the FreeBSD ports tree right after the show here. So if people want to play with it via the ports system, you can, and then you'll have packages here in about a week or so.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks a lot for doing that. Yeah, that would be much easier than compiling it.
Yeah. Let's just make it easy for everyone. Just package, install, relaunchd, and done.
Exactly. Very cool.
So, do you anticipate this eventually becoming a PID1 quality init system? Because one of the things that really attracted me to this initially was I saw in your description that this doesn't have to be PID1. In other words, I can launch relaunchd via the existing rc.d scripts, and then it can manage things. So that's how I'm testing it here. I'm converting a few things over to relaunchd to try it without having to like rip out bits of my base.
Yeah, I mean, I see moving into PID1 and taking over init as sort of the feature creep that you were talking about. Like init does a pretty good job at what it needs to do, like start your computer up and launch some kind of init system after that, which is etcrc for BSDs. So I'm not sure that it needs to become PID1. I don't think there's a lot of benefit to being PID1. So what I would actually like is PID1 to be kind of like the supervisor for relaunchd, so that if relaunchd ever dies because it's trying to do something too fancy, PID1 would restart relaunchd. So I want relaunchd to be restartable and save its state, so that if the process dies, it could come back and pick up where it left off, essentially, instead of having your computer crash, which that's something I really don't want to do and don't want to turn people off by breaking their systems. So I think it would be a long way away, but I would like it to become a quality init system. And if over time people are interested in replacing init or pulling the functions of init into it, and they can make a compelling reason why it needs to be in there, then I'm open to it. But it's not something I'm actively looking to do.
Okay. It's not that's why I liked it. It didn't seem like an all or nothing. Like I didn't have to rip apart part of my system and change the init just to play with it. Like I just package installed it, ran the command, and started adding jobs. Done. Like so.
Yeah, so I want to start at the outside, start with the easy way, and then work towards the hard problems like replacing init and stuff like that.
Cool.
Have you looked at any of the other init systems like systemd, openrc, nosh, etc.? Is there any features of those that stand out that you might want to replicate in relaunchd?
I think so. I'm trying not to get too excited about them, so I don't get too much feature creep. But I'm familiar with like Solaris SMF. You got milestones. There's a lot of features that you could add to it. So I think I'm trying to be conservative. But there's some good ideas in Nosh. I think it's trying to be, I think, a little bigger than what I imagine a init system should be. Like it emulates systemd. It can emulate like an HP init system. It provides a lot of wrappers. So it's like a 35,000 line program. And that's bigger. That's not the direction I want to go in terms of complexity. Systemd is interesting. I have looked at some of its like security features, so like the stuff it can do with SE Linux. I'm interested in like having analogs to it, not necessarily like a direct one-to-one match. But I don't even know too much about the equivalent of SE Linux. I guess it's like Mac or Trusted BSD or labeling. Like, so if there were ever features like that, I would probably want the ability to control that if people wanted to. But yeah, I'm open to other init systems ideas, but I really want to focus on finishing the core functionality that LaunchD already has to make it kind of feature parity with what the traditional LaunchD and what Apple has done with its LaunchD. And then we can start thinking about like what are some of the other features from other init systems to take on.
Okay. So it sounds like you've been doing a lot of open source over the years. So what keeps you motivated to keep working on all this? Is it just hobby?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun. I enjoy programming. So I'm a systems engineer. I do a lot of server builds at work. And so I do some programming, but it does leave some time for like the kind of mental exercises that trying to push, new technologies out there um, allows you. Yeah, I think it's good to give back to the community. So when I know there's like a demand for this kind of thing, I've
Hmm.
heard lots of people say like, "Oh, I want something like LaunchD, but it's just not out there. It's not ready yet. I can't get it on my OS." I'm like, well, maybe if I build it, they will come.
All
So
right. That's a good place to start.
see what happens. But I mean, hopefully, I can. I'm putting in some time now to try to get people interested in it. Hopefully, we'll get more developers, and it won't be a one man show anymore, and I can kind of step back and just take credit for other people's work, which I think.
That's the goal of every open source project.
Yeah,
Right?
that'd be pretty great. So.
Nice.
So, do you have any other hobbies outside of open source?
Yeah, I'm a kind of an amateur musician, so I pick up like a new instrument every few years: guitar, bass, drums, vocals, keyboards. So one of these days, and then I try doing recording and the home studio stuff. So whenever I can, I try to dabble in that a bit.
Okay. Cool. Anything else you want to tell us about? I think the version I'm going to throw in ports is what 021 or something is what you have it tagged as. So is
Yeah,
that the latest?
latest and greatest. Yeah,
Okay. Well,
it's
good
cool.
deal. Yeah. Anything else you want to tell us about it, or any pleas you want to make to have people come look at specific parts of it?
Um, No, I think it's ready, and I'm sure people will find other problems. So if you want to, if you enjoy ripping stuff apart and telling me how terrible it is, like go for it. But hopefully it's not too terrible. And I just appreciate really anybody's interest in it. I think it's a fun little project. It's not too mentally taxing to understand how it works, and I think it has the potential to be something useful to a lot of people.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Hmm.
We appreciate you being on the show this week and taking the time to talk to us about this.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview, but we still have more news and beastie bits and a lot of questions to get to this week, so we're going to dive right into it. But before we start with the news roundup, real quick, we do want to mention another sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean. And of course, digitalocean.com is where you want to go to get signed up and start creating droplets. You can spin up FreeBSD and a VM up in the cloud on an SSD with a lot of transfer available for
Hmm.
cheap, like $5 a month for a terabyte. Come
Yeah.
on, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It is very cool, and of course, if you use the coupon code FreeBSD now, you get a $10 credit. So it's like 2 months for
Hmm.
nothing. So no reason not to. But I guess Alan, you were saying we got some new tutorials that they've posted as well,
Yes, I
huh?
know they've posted a bunch of new tutorials in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But if you go in there and search for FreeBSD, you can see all the tutorials they have on FreeBSD. And
Hmm.
hopefully we can actually see some new ones there as well soon.
Great, great. Well, again, check that out, guys. DigitalOcean.com. Of course, they have data centers all over the world. So if you want to host it in New York or Singapore, or where are the other ones?
Yeah,
Toronto
so
now
they
is the
have
new one.
Toronto, San Francisco, New York, London,
London.
Amsterdam, Frankfurt, and Singapore.
Dang.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of places to choose from. Of course, they have a nice little tool on their website. So if you want to ping all those and check your connectivity, see what kind of upload and download you can get to
Hmm.
them, you can do that. That'll help you make a decision where you want to host things. I know when I was checking, setting up a Mumble server here, I was like, okay, who's got the lowest latency to Charter's backbone, blah, blah, blah. And that helped me figure it out.
Yes, I know.
So,
Actually, the lady who wrote the tutorial for Let's Encrypt that we were talking about earlier, she was looking
mhm.
at DigitalOcean from Norway. This server in Amsterdam wasn't as didn't have the best route compared to I think the one in Germany or something, and so that's where she
Oh,
decided to put her
interesting.
VM. And yeah,
Yeah.
because they
So,
provide the speed tests and IPs to do trace routes and stuff, you can actually see what it's going to be like before you pick where to put it. And that
mhm.
really, or you have the option of going to two different places, and that way when you back stuff up, it's not going to be, it's much less likely to be affected by the same issue or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. One earthquake won't take them both out, hopefully. Well, again, guys, digitalocean.com. Go get set up today. And of course, let us know if you're doing something unique or interesting up there. We like to hear that. Okay, so news roundup. We got kind of a sneak preview of some new stuff that's coming in the next OpenSense, or upcoming OpenSense, called Inline Intrusion Prevention System, or IPS is what they're calling this. But their release 16.1 is around the corner. And one of the big features that they're kind of touting here is, I'm not sure how you pronounce the tool, Suricata?
Yeah, Suricata.
Okay. Okay. With a NetMap 2.1 enabled, they have a version of that which is going to allow deep packet inspection of all traffic. So, for example, looking at each packet individually, you only want to block specific ones. And then they use the example of blocking Warcraft on somebody's machine, which, oh, sad.
Yeah.
But still, you can do that. That is a thing. And of course, they show it off here. It's just a simple mouse click away, enable, done. And then they have a whole set of default rules set up under the emerging threats community rules. And of course, you can go in there and flip things on and off at will as you want. But definitely a neat feature. It sounds like they're working on.
Yeah, and basically, so I use NetMap to shunt all the packets into the deep packet inspection application, and then when it's done, only the ones it wants to allow will then get shuffled back and get routed. And this is a very interesting capability to add on here, and really shows off the power of NetMap.
That's right. That's right. Can you block YouTube videos with that?
Pretty sure you can. Yeah.
Right? There you go. There you go. I know all these business owners right now are like, wait, what's that site again? Go there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got some Hammer 2 information next. I guess Matthew Dillon's been working on some hard links support there, which this is actually a commit we have here, but he wrote enough information that's practically a story in and of itself. But I guess the backstory he gave was that the H2 design for Hammer FS2 has had a long-standing problem on losing track of hard links when intermediate directories are being renamed, which breaks the common parent directory design of the inode target. So the fix they came up with in this commit was one which instead places the hard link target in the first common parent directory, which can be marked with the xlink VSCH flag, which is interesting. And if no parent happens to be marked xlink, it'll then fall through to the root of the mount. So again, interesting. But it looks like they're already using this in this commit. They've modified install world to set //user/var/home as various xlink flagged directories. So of course, this will prevent you from moving hard links across these directories, but I guess that's similar if you're already used to dealing with multiple partitions or data sets. You're not really losing anything in addition there. It's just how it
preventing weird
works.
things from happening.
That's right. That's right. But it is good to see that has been fixed. I didn't even know that was a long-standing problem with it at the moment.
And then note LPR tries to hard link the file you're trying to print into var spool, and but will copy it if it can't. So it's just kind of a bug where if you didn't actually block the cross file system hard linking, it would do weird things you weren't expecting. But if you do block then the program behaves properly.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. That's cool. Okay, what's this next one we got here, Alan? I guess we haven't heard from the NetBSD guys over in Japan recently, but we got a whole bunch of new pictures here. So I'll let you narrate these, but we have descriptions of those.
Yeah, basically, they just have the pictures of the booth, some different machines, including SVR4 on PC98, Raspberry Pi 2 running NetBSD, Odroid C1, NetWalker, bunch of other different things.
Yeah, they even had a cell phone, like a Sharp 03. But what's kind of nice looking through the pictures this time around, they have the nice little card plaques on each picture so you can see what it is exactly you're looking at with English as well. Which comes
this one's got slides, but they're all in Japanese.
Yeah. If you read Japanese, that'll be a treat.
Yeah.
But it looks like this was at the Tokushima Open Source Conference here, 2015.
And they got
just this last
this
month.
machine's running FreeBSD PC98 8.4 because that was the last PC98 release. And then they got pictures of somebody giving a talk, a manual for something. The screen's running these various applications. Yep, there's the X68030. And there's the NetWalker, and there's the HPC ARM processor on a phone. lots of different things there.
Yeah, we need to get them to bring these things stateside at some point. That would be cool to see at a conference out here.
Yeah.
One of the big Linux conferences, everyone will walk up and go, "Oh, I didn't know BSD could run on this stuff." Well, of course.
Imagine trying to get, a box full of cell phones through U.S. airport security.
It's just faster to ship them. Just do that. Don't even send it via mail. All right. Well, what's this next one we got here, Alan? I guess a blog post by the 3 OpenBSD users blog.
Yeah. So this is a user's blog, and a blog post titled "One of the 3 OpenBSD users." So recently he's been taking a look at SyncThing, which is kind of a Dropbox/OwnCloud alternative.
Sure.
And he's been liking it. I know quite a few FreeBSD people that use it. Actually, I think the FreeBSD project might even use it to sync their package mirrors or something, or moving some files around internally in the cluster anyway.
Oh, interesting.
And he says his initial impressions were quite good, and it runs in Go, so it's pretty fast and it's easy to deploy because basically just the Go compiler, and you compile it and it's good to go. And they also the SyncThing project makes official OpenBSD binaries that are digitally signed and everything. And he said his initial test drive lasted more than a week, and during that time, the SyncThing project released some minor releases, and this is his Linux boxes that were running upgraded automatically. He says, and those automatic upgrades can be disabled because, if you install it from your package manager, having the files change after the fact might not be what you intended. He said, unfortunately, his OpenBSD machines didn't actually do the automatic upgrade because they failed with an error saying where they couldn't read /proc/curproc/file, which is, an obvious Linuxism for figuring out what the actual file name of the current process is. And, /proc has been gone on OpenBSD for a while. It's been gone on FreeBSD for a long time as well, although you can get a Linux-compatible one back if you need it for such applications.
Sure.
But, he found the same problem in the upstream provider's repository and kind of looked at it, and he subscribed to the update that for the ticket that somebody had opened about it in January, and eventually found that SyncThing just closed the ticket and said that, maybe one of the 3 OpenBSD users who will feel strongly enough about this to propose a patch to fix it, rather than actually writing a fix themselves. And the user that wrote the blog here is kind of that kind of grinds my gears, but in a positive way. Back when I was using Linux in the 90s, I remember people using the same excuse to completely ignore or close issues from the completely valid user base of Linux users, right? And it has some links to some Twitter comments from game companies saying that, we don't worry so much about the Linux versions of our games, or in the one that says Linux is a second-class citizen. We don't run it internally because there are only 17 users of it, and which is the kind of the quote that got him started on this rant when he saw the same thing happen with SyncThing. But mostly goes to point out that SyncThing's that 3 OpenBSD users thing comes from on SyncThing's website. They have a metrics page where they show the breakdown of operating systems where the users are coming from. But basically, when you set up SyncThing, one of the configs options is whether you want to, anonymously report usage statistics. Right? Lots of programs have that option, and most people say no by default. Right?
Sure.
Well, if you're an OpenBSD user, you're probably even more likely to say no.
Yeah. So that's kind of the point.
Yeah. So apparently only 3 OpenBSD people have ever said yes. And so it looks, as far as SyncThing is concerned, they only have 3 OpenBSD users, even though they might have a bunch more. There are 241 FreeBSD users apparently, and now there are 7 OpenBSD users, because what the user in the blog did was then go turn it on all of his OpenBSD machines, and just by doing that doubled the number of OpenBSD users of this application. And is hoping that, he can, if a bunch of other people were to do that, then maybe the SyncThing would take OpenBSD more seriously. But at the same time, maybe there's some OpenBSD user of SyncThing out there that could write the patch, because it does look fairly trivial to just be like, in the case of any BSD, here's the real way to find out the path of the current binary. because I think FreeBSD even would benefit from that. It's like you can mount the like lin procfs in order to get that /proc/cur/proc/file, but if the application would just do it the right way, you wouldn't need to do that, right?
Yeah, more things not needing procfs.
Exactly, because it's not on by default. But by the look of it, FreeBSD has almost 10 times as many users as Android of this application, so that's a good start.
Right, there you go. So I guess other FreeBSD users will have to go turn on their metrics, at least for a time, so that they get reported. You don't have to leave it on, but at least show up and be counted.
Yep.
Okay, we're back. We got Beastie Bits and, of course, a lot of feedback to get to. But really quick, before we do that, we're going to talk about our last sponsor here, which is going to be Tarsnap. Of course, tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where you can go and get signed up, make an account. Just take you a few minutes before we even get through the first couple Beastie Bits. You'll probably be already set. Put a few bucks in there and then grab a client. Start doing your encrypted backups today, right now, and don't put it off any longer because, let's be honest, you will lose data eventually. It's just a matter of time. Hard drives are not perfect. Floods happen, earthquakes happen, kids happen, things
Lost
happen.
devices happen, dropped devices happen.
That's right. That's right. So you need to be backing up somewhere off-site. But if you're going to do it off-site, you don't want people reading all your data because that's just silly. And who wants that?
It reminds me of the FreeNAS video commercial I saw once. It was like, when your little daughter decides to share her juice box with your laptop keyboard.
Yeah.
It's like, you really wish you had a backup.
That's right. That's right. So you can make that real simple today, guys. If you go to Tarsnap and, like I said, just put a couple bucks in there, you'll be shocked how cheap it is, especially doing multiple backups because it's only sending the bits that have changed every time. So it's not like you're doing a full master every time you kick off a new backup. And you're only paying for what you're actually using on the site. It's measured in pico dollars. How crazy is that?
Well, yes. And
yeah, definitely want to get set
that's
up.
just fun to say. 250 pico dollars per byte month.
That's right. That's right. People look at you like, what? And then you got to do the math to figure that out. Well, how much am I paying?
Cheap is what that is.
That is very cheap. And of course, guys, because the source is available, you can verify it's doing what it says it's doing and know it's not sending a carbon copy off to the NSA or anybody else that wants a copy of it. So you can verify that it does what it's supposed to do and audit it yourself, compile it yourself if you want. Don't even have to trust the binaries up on the site, which how cool is that for backup software? Almost nobody does that. I don't think anyone else does, as far as I know. So, anyway, yeah, there's no reason you shouldn't be using them. So if you're a listener here, do yourself a favor. Go hit up Tarsnap today. Okay, so Beastie Bits. We got a whole bunch of stuff. We got a bunch of Dragonfly stuff to talk about, but we'll go through them here real quick. So first up, we'll start with Dragonfly. It looks like their 4.4 release candidate branch has been created and tagged now. So that is out. I guess the release should be coming out here soon.
And they have kind of a summary of which changes got pushed in here, and they got a bunch from different people. Quite a bit of stuff for IPFW3. Francois Turgeau's got 61 commits about the Intel graphics drivers.
Don't rub it in.
He's helping.
He's helping.
The previous guy,
Jean
Sebastian. That was it. And then there's a bunch of other people doing the sensors and core power stuff, the VTNet. John Marino has 190. I think some of that is the locale stuff that he worked on with Baptiste. And all this I see, it's all string collation, libc, locale, man page stuff. Lots of fun there.
Cool.
It's nice to see that all getting into a release.
And that hard link fix we mentioned earlier, I'm sure is part of this as well.
Matthew Dillon has got 59 commits. A lot of them labeled Hammer 2 and the rest kernel. It's actually some improvements to the Wi-Fi driver by the look of it as well. The IWM, the new 7260 chip or whatever. Quite a few different developers in here with quite a few different commits. So some of the names I recognize, but some of them I don't. We'll have to hound them for interviews.
That's right. We will fix this. You have been warned.
Cephi's got lots of IPv6 cleanups in here. Socket stuff, UIPC. The CCP and UDP user request stuff that we talked about the other week, the speed ups that he did.
Yep.
And one of the ones we're about to talk about in a minute, but his changes to top are in there as well.
Okay.
And then I got some other people working on Hammer as well. Quite a bit of interesting stuff going on in there.
Okay. Well, great. Well, next up here in the bits, we got a kind of a nice how-to. This is a really long one, so it's a shame we're mentioning it so quickly, but this may be of interest to some of you. It's about how to NFS boot in Beehive, which may be very interesting if, like Alan mentioned earlier, if you want to boot up a kernel or something and try something out, you don't have to go through and make a whole VM image for that. Just throw it on an NFS and away you go. But a pretty detailed blog post here on how to do that.
Yes, actually, links to GitHub with this nice little script that does most of the setup for you, making it even easier.
Oh, geez. Okay.
But yeah, it basically allows you to start a Beehive with NFS boot, so that you can you basically set a bunch of environment variables, and it will boot a kernel off NFS. And then if that NFS happens to be on your host system, then it's nice and fast, and makes it very easy to test out changes you want to do. So if you're doing any development on the operating system, it makes it very easy to spin it up, try it out, crash it, fix the problem, spin it up again, and work on it. And especially with, Beehive already has all these debugging features built in for, after you get it started up, you can hook a GDB up to it, or you can do pass-through and hook GDB up into the kernel on the guest and so on. Lots of interesting things you can do in there.
Cool. Okay, well, you have to take a look at that. Well, next up, we also have a post here from Justin also talking about the release for Dragonfly 4.4. So it looks like they're trying to get the release candidate rolled here soon. They're aiming for the end of the month. I don't know if that's officially hit yet. Have you heard, Alan?
No.
Okay, well, I imagine pretty soon here, so keep your eyes open for that. Okay, next one, we have Atheros, the QCA 95.3X Honeybee has been added to FreeBSD. So another Wi-Fi chipset, I assume.
Yeah, so this is the next generation version of is on that Onion Omega that I was working on. So instead of the 93.3X, this is the 95.3X. And so it has a PCIe little bus there, but the other big thing is that basically has a gigabit uplink port instead of all 100 megabit ports. So it's got a switch that's only got a bunch of 100 megabit ports on it, but the uplink into the CPU is actually a gigabit, and some other interesting things. And it's got 32 megs of RAM and 4 megs of flash in the reference board that Adrian got sent by Qualcomm Atheros to get it working. But various different configurations of it will obviously come with different amounts of memory and flash, but it's likely that this will be the basis of quite a few more little devices, and so having FreeBSD support for it coming up quickly is good to see.
Yeah, it is neat to see that it sits on top of the releases here. Okay, well, next up we have the top command on Dragonfly. It looks like they've got support for the C command, the interactive command, which I guess is similar to the G command in OpenBSD's top. It allows you to filter by command name.
I want that in our top. I'm going to have to look at porting that.
Somebody needs to steal that. I'm looking, what is it, 6 lines changed?
Yeah, it should be pretty easy to add a filter. Or it's entirely possible ours already does it and I don't know about it. And C is currently not
It's been in there since 97. What was that? Sorry,
I was thinking the lowercase c was already taken for something, but it's not. And so, I'm going to have to bookmark that one.
Okay, Alan is officially stealing that.
Yeah.
Watch for the FreeBSD commit. Okay, so what was it? You have the video here. I don't know if you're able to pause it, Alan, or not,
I think I can
FreeBSD.
get us a snapshot of it. But this is a news story from the Netherlands 6 o'clock news the other day, talking about more students studying in higher education. And I don't know if you just saw it go by there, but they just kind of past a picture of a student sitting in the library reading, and he happens to be reading the design and implementation of FreeBSD operating system.
Good reading material. See, future committer. That's great. Okay, next up we have Semibug. Just gave a recap of their inaugural meeting. I guess Michael Lucas wrote up about this and their plan for future meetups. Now, which city is that in again?
This
He's,
is in southeast Michigan. So I
okay,
don't know which
Southeast.
city specifically, but it's, anybody that lives in that part of Michigan would likely be able to go there. And it's
Sweet.
apparently located at a horse racing track because they have nice conference facilities that they would let them borrow cheaply.
Okay. He mentions that they already have the next four lined up, the next four presentations for meetings lined up, including building packages on OpenBSD, Ghost BSD talk, some more OpenBSD, and then Lucas talking about FreeBSD file systems. So
Yes.
sounds interesting. So yeah, if you're in that area and can make it out to these bugs, take a look at the link here, and maybe you can come to the next one.
And I offered to give them live streaming and recording for it, but apparently the people that are speaking are self-conscious and don't want to do that yet. But maybe in the
Oh,
future,
don't be camera shy.
you know, you check out the videos from some of the other conferences, and you will feel it's like, oh, I can do at least that well. It's fine.
Right, it's not that big a deal. Just talk and people want to hear. So, okay, well now we got feedback and questions, and we got quite a few this week we're going to get to. So first up is Adam, who writes in asking about Jelly encryption on USB. So he says, hello, Alan and Chris. First of all, I've been listening to the podcast a while now. Really enjoy it. This is my first time writing in. I have a USB key that I've encrypted with Jelly using both a key file and a password, pretty much following the section in the handbook, and he gives us the link here. Because the device is encrypted with both to use it on different computers, do I also need a copy of the key file? Yes, if you set it up that way. After encrypting my USB drive on my server, which has the key file, when I try to run Jelly attach on my laptop, which does not have the key file, Jelly errors, but I don't know if I copy the key file to the laptop, then I can attach and mount the drive just fine. You should be able to do that. That's how we did our Persona Crypt utility, using that exact same step. You have your public key, or your password you type in, and then the other half of the key is stored locally on the box.
I have to look into how it actually works. Is it just that the key file is then encrypted with the password, and then the key file is the content, or is it like split between the two somehow?
I don't know how that works. I don't know if it's split between the two or not. I never looked at the internals to see what exactly it's doing. I just know it didn't work if you're missing half or one piece of it.
Because when I'm working on the bits for the bootloader, currently it only supports if you only have a password, not if you have a key file, which is slightly problematic because the way we built the installer, if you use Jelly from the installer, it always sets it up with the key file and the password. And so I'm going to have to look into that and try to figure out some way that how to access the key file. Basically, with the new the Jelly boot bits that I've been working on, there's no part of the disk that's not encrypted, and so there's no place to keep the key files.
So yeah, whenever we did that with Grub, we would just not do the two-part encryption, just password only.
Yeah.
That was the only way I could think of to do it. So unless, of course, I think there's a way you can put the other half of the key on another USB stick. And
You
provide
could
it
do
that way.
so. Yeah, I'm looking at support for maybe that. Although I don't know early in the boot process if you can, I think it'd be dependent on your BIOS to have support for the USB stick and so on.
Sure.
And the other one was making some new partition type, and it's like, here's a little partition. It's like 16 kilobytes or something, and we'll just raw dump a key into it. But it's like, well, how do you tell how long the key is? And then I have to basically write my own brand new file system to store encryption keys in. And I'm like, I think that sounds complicated.
Yuck. Yeah, yuck. All right. Well, he says, I don't know if we know that if the USB key can be decrypted with just the password, but no, you need both of them to decrypt it. Like that's kind of the whole
design
point of it.
feature.
Split it. Yeah. Let's see. He mentions he's a contributor to a small FreeBSD distribution called PackBSD, formerly Arch, and let's see. They also offer the choice of using FreeBSD's init or openrc as well, running the BSD core utilities or GNU core utilities based off FreeBSD 10.1, although they have 11 current running as well. But he sends me a PS. It looks like you're from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm actually in Maryville, just a little south of there. But he said, I'm from Chattanooga, soaking up our awesome gigabit internet. Yeah, rub it in. I know. You guys have great internet down there. He says, do you know of any BSD-focused meetup or user groups in the area or anything? He said, everything in my area leans towards Linux. While I have nothing against Linux, it would be nice to talk BSDs from time to time. I'm not aware of any. I know we have a Linux group that meets up at Knoxville at the university there, and I've been to that a couple times many, many years ago. But I do not know if there's a BSD specific one in the area. So if anyone else does know, let us know if there's something within driving distance of, say, Chattanooga or Knoxville. Although he's close enough to Atlanta, I would assume if there's going to be one, that would probably be the location. But if you're in Atlanta or whatever, let us know because that's at least decent driving from Chattanooga.
Yeah. Or you can do what Kevin Bolin did in Phoenix and just go to the Linux group and do the presentation one week and explain to all of them what BSD is and get them all excited about BSD and just slowly subvert the entire Linux meeting into BSD.
And it just turns into a bug over time. Yes. That's true. It's like a virus.
Or, the two can happily coexist, if you just get enough interest from people. So, don't be afraid to go to a Linux bug and, I wouldn't say crash the party, but, spread the word.
Yeah, I would definitely look. Chattanooga may be big enough for a Linux one. Of course, Atlanta probably has a much larger one. So check that out. Maybe give a presentation, since it sounds like you're doing advanced stuff, rolling your own distros anyway. Okay, you want to read the next one here, Alan?
So Noble writes in about a radius setup. He says they and their coworker are occasionally watchers of BSD Now and TechSnap, and have used a few of the tutorials to set up BSD servers to take over for old Linux and Windows servers. As much as we'd like to set up radius authentication for SSH on these boxes, I've read the PAM module section of the FreeBSD handbook and tried asking in other communities, but it's still lost. I have an existing radius server, other devices authenticate to, so right now I'm just trying to get a testing VM to talk to the radius server. I know that some of the changes need to be made to files in etc pam.d, but not sure if there's supposed to be a radius file or changes to the SSH file. I think with SSH using PAM, you shouldn't have to make any changes to SSH itself. It would just be the PAM setup. I've never used Radius before, but I know lots of people have done it with FreeBSD, often as FreeBSD being the Radius server. So I imagine it's fairly easy to get FreeBSD to talk to a Radius server, but not something I've ever needed to do.
Yeah, I've not had any personal experience with it either. I remember working in an ISP and we had Radius set up, but I didn't ever touch the config. Heck, that was back when I was still learning how to use Pico. So it was a while back.
But if anybody does know or has experience with Radius and BSD, please send us a note about that. And if you're really adventurous, you could write a nice tutorial for everybody. But even just a couple of tips on where to look might help this guy get going.
Okay. Great. Well, next up we have Jim, and this is an interesting one, talking about backporting Wi-Fi. And by backporting, I mean like really backporting. But he says, I just discovered your podcast, and I'm heavily involved with FreeBSD these days, so I have a question for you or anybody who might be able to help answer. I'm having a very odd problem with the backport. I have backported the 10.2 Atheros driver and the entire 10.2 net 802.11n system to a customized 6.4 kernel. Don't ask why I've done this. Suffice to say it was necessary, and at a later point we will deploy a complete 10.2-based system. He says, now the Atheros driver makes use of linker sets, as does portions of the net 802.11 system. My problem is that the Atheros driver won't link at build time because the linker sets it defines are showing up as unresolved references. Yet the N02 or net 802.11 code does properly link with its linker sets being properly identified. He said, I had to extensively, and I do mean extensively, modify the 802.11 code to get it to go in the 6.4 kernel, yet it links right in while the nearly full stock Atheros driver does not. Would anyone here have any ideas why this may be or how to best debug the problem?
That's build stuff is kind of over my head.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's some other bit of infrastructure in the build system that's not coming with you or something. It's hard to say when you're going back to a kernel that old. It's not so much the kernel being that old, it's that the whole build system is,
Yeah, well, isn't it?
That's
Clang
long
now, right?
before
10.2.
Clang. But, the ASO stuff does work with the old GCC because that's the MIPS and stuff still compiles with the old GCC. So
that's good.
Although 6.4 might be so old that it's not the newest old GCC. I wonder.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What version of GCC is there in 6.4? If it's not GCC, was it like 4.2.1 is the last one we get?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 4.2.1.
No, honestly, Yeah, this is a good question. I don't know if we'll get a response to this one since me and Alan aren't going to know off the top of our head. This may be a good one for like FreeBSD hackers mailing list. So once you get through the first couple responses of why the heck did you try doing this, then you'll hopefully get a good answer.
I'm sure there's a bunch of people there that know exactly why. It's like it's for an
That's
appliance, and But what I do recommend is if you go over to the FreeBSD Journal website and get the issue about Isilon and all of the pain they went through for making these same mistakes, maybe
now you
will push
story.
harder towards going to 10.2, or actually, the advice in that article is that you should definitely be building on 11, because by the time you finish getting all caught up, 10.2 will be end of life and you'll be in the same situation. So you really got to aim at head so that, by the time you finish catching everything up, when it's 11.1 comes out at the same time, you won't be in such a bad position.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out. If you do find a solution or whatever, point us to the mailing list later so we can take a look at that. Okay, next one's not so much a question, but is a short, funny story. But Mohammed writes in, and he says, "Hey guys, love your podcast. It's currently my favorite and the only one I've actually gone back to episode 1 and started listening to all the ones I missed." So people actually binge watch our show now. Is that a thing?
I remember when I first got Dan Langell, that runs BSD Can, into TechSnap, and he started but he was going through them backwards, though, from most recent back towards episode 1. So he was watching the show regress and get worse.
Yeah, my OCD doesn't allow that. Like, and I can't start midway through a season.
Right.
Well, I have to go to episode 1 if I'm going to watch it.
Sure. Although, my sysadmin podcast doesn't really have any continuity or anything. It was more, obviously, the newer news was more interesting at first.
Sure.
And more relevant. Whereas if you started at the beginning, by the time you caught up, you would miss a whole bunch of current news that would have been handy to know, right? But just here, he was leaving little comments about some of the episodes on Twitter, and I was just like, there's proof that he's been watching all of those episodes.
That's right. All right, well, the rest of his comment here, he says, "I was listening to one earlier today when Alan was talking about how FreeBSD had better performance than Linux. He said, I just remembered a job interview I had a couple months ago with a very big retail company, and they asked me if I knew how to deal with zombie processes. I said, no, I haven't seen one since I started using FreeBSD back in 2008. Oh, I must have messed the next line there because I copied and pasted this, but he basically said I never heard back from them. I wonder if that was it.
Well, you can definitely have zombie processes in FreeBSD, although usually the meaning of zombie is probably a bit different. On FreeBSD, if a program is in the process of is like writing stuff out to disk and then exits, it stays a zombie until the write to disk is finished, and then it goes away. And so, they clean up after themselves. I've never seen if a process is stuck in the zombie state on FreeBSD, it's usually because it's waiting for some other event to happen. Like, it spawned a child and that child hasn't died yet, so the parent can't go away until the child is finished.
Sure.
Or it's waiting on some event to happen in the system. But I've never had maybe they mean a different definition of zombie process, right? Like in FreeBSD, there's, if you run top, it says, there are 20 processes, 1 running and 19 sleeping and 2 zombies or something. Or if you're in PS, there's the flag is capital Z. But that's different than a stuck process. Sometimes you can get a process that just will never die. I've had that. A MySQL server where it was in the process of exiting and it got down and it's like there was only 16 kilobytes of memory that wasn't freed yet. And it just wouldn't exit or die. It just stuck there for 2 years using 16 kilobytes of memory. But I didn't.
The only time I had a lot of problems with processes not going away is when I was messing around with Fuse, trying to write. Enough said. Anyway. Okay, well, last up we have Miguel writes in. He asks for a scale engine behind the scenes, but he says, hey, team, I was wondering if Alan has ever given us a behind the scenes of what goes on at Scale Engine, kind of how Chris gave us a walkthrough of PCBSD. I have seen various videos of Alan's talks, and there's definitely a tease as to kind of what goes on. I'm madly impressed that he can manage 100 plus FreeBSD servers and terabytes of storage by himself. I work on a team of 12 managing about 500 Linux instances. He says, so I was wondering if we can get more details without giving away the company's secret sauce, of course, as to how this magic happens.
Mostly it's that FreeBSD just works. You set it up and you don't touch it, and it doesn't stop working. We deployed the servers, use Puppet to push out the configs, and then they operate. And we monitor them, but usually the only eventful thing is, a disk has died, and we have to have somebody at the remote data center go flip the disk and put in a fresh one. And then, we do our upgrades. Although, because our servers are all... we have two different sets of servers. The one set, obviously, is our storage servers where we keep everybody's videos, and those ones get upgraded in place and treated nicely, and they have names and so on. And then we have the edge servers that actually just serve videos and serve like the PCBSD, CDN and stuff. They don't have much. The PCBSD stuff is a little special because we have servers with more disk for that, and we tend not to just blow those servers away and repave them because it takes a while to re-replicate the 500 gigs of packages.
Sorry.
But for our regular video servers, if a server is being problematic or if it's time to upgrade it, it's like, it's still 9.3 and we're switching over to 10.2, we usually just erase the hard drive and start over because there's nothing on those servers that is special. And then, you just redeploy the OS, run Puppet, it sets everything up, and the server's back in production and everybody's happy. The biggest thing is the talk from back in 2012 at EuroBSDCon about our load balancer that automatically takes care of, you've shut that server down or marked it as down, or that server's down. Stop sending people there and move the load elsewhere. And, so it means that when something goes wrong, I usually don't have to do anything about it until I get around to it. And that gives me the flexibility to say, when things go wrong on Wednesdays, I can just ignore them until the podcast is over.
Which is a good thing. Well, great. Well, thanks for writing in. We appreciate that. Maybe we'll talk him into doing a more in-depth, maybe how you do Puppet or some of the...
Yeah, although
kind of cool.
We'd mostly prefer to not keep using Puppet. They keep changing and breaking things in it, and it's annoying.
Well, just tell us how you're suffering.
Yes.
That's fine.
That works too.
That works too. Okay, guys. Well, as we wrap up here, of course, we're going to let you know, try and send everything into feedback@bsdnow.tv. So, yes, email. We still use that. That's what we rely on. So if you're commenting on a YouTube video or whatever, we're not going to see that. I mean, we do sometimes see tweets, but if you really want it to get mentioned on the show or you find a cool story or something, send it to feedback@bsdnow.tv. And it can be more than stories. If you want to suggest somebody for an interview, somebody who's doing something neat out in the community, send that in as well so we can get in touch with them and try and get an interview scheduled and bring that to you in a future episode. But of course, thanks for being with us this week. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking at you same time next week.